Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Project Egg Show. Today, we have an extraordinary guest, the queen of social media, somebody who has been featured on the Today Show, Cosmopolitan, the Daily Mail, Huffington Post, Funnel Magazine, and Content Marketing Institute. We have the honor today of speaking with Rachel Pedersen. How are you today, Rachel?
I am so good, Ben. Thank you so much for having me. It is such an honor.
The pleasure is all mine. Let's jump right in. What is your story?
Ooh, all right. How far back should we go? My story is kind of crazy. It kind of starts about 8 years ago when I became a single mom at the age of 21. And I was a college dropout. While I was pregnant with my first daughter, I applied for a job at Taco Bell and didn't get it. And so I'm sitting here with the responsibility of a child and no clue how I'm going to build a life that's better than what I was raised in. I was like, what are we going to do? And for me, the best answer was I'm going to go to school to become a hairstylist. And I went to school, became a hairstylist. That was challenging. I didn't have a car, so I took like a bus an hour and a half each way, walking through the snow oftentimes because I'm in Minnesota. It's freezing cold. And I believed that there was something bigger. While I was in school for hair, I hustled and I was like, I'm going to get attention. I'm going to make sure that people notice me. I want to be the best. And I applied at the 5 top salons in Minnesota. And I got calls back from all 5 and had interviews at all 5. So I got to pick which one do I want to work at. Now I picked my salon and it was great. It was wonderful. It was an amazing training opportunity. We won awards while we were in school. They had like a training academy, a secondary training academy. We won awards, but it wasn't quite as fulfilling as I had hoped it would be. If you've ever been to a salon, the dynamics are kind of catty, for lack of a better word. And I just wasn't in a place where I was loving it every single day. Now, around 5.5 years ago, I met my husband. And when I met my husband, it was a whirlwind romance. Like I fell in love so fast. Do you know how fast? Okay, well, I'll tell you how fast. My husband and I met on a Wednesday and got married 13 days later on a Tuesday. We eloped and started our forever journey together, which is crazy, right? It's pretty crazy. So we got married, and I just knew like this is it. This is the person I want to build my life with. A month later, we were like, oh, we've got marriage figured out. Let's have our second kid. So we started trying, and we got pregnant right away. And so we brought our second child into our lives. But the interesting thing is, one day when I was doing hair, a client came in and she said, my husband owns this little company. What do you know about social media? And I was like, well, I know that when I post stuff on social media, I get more clients. And she was like, okay, well, do you think you could help us? I've got this project I have to take on, and it's with this thing called Tweeter. And I was like, okay, I'm not an expert in social media, but I know more than her, and I can help her with their Twitter. I can help her get it set up and see what we can do. And I went to their house, and leaving that meeting, there was just this strong gut feeling, this is it. Like marketing is the thing that I was meant to do with my life. And so I jumped from being a hairstylist and went and applied at digital marketing agencies. I got a position at one, worked my way up, and ended up getting hired at an Inc. 5000 tech company as their marketing manager, still with no degree, no credentials. I still don't really know why exactly they hired me, but that's okay because it all worked out. And it was about September, October of 2015 when suddenly I started to have people contacting me saying, can you help us with our social media? And within 6 months, I built a clientele that rivaled and matched my salary from my 9 to 5. And that's when it was time. Okay, it's time to leave. Right when I submitted notice, one of my posts went massively viral and it reached 11.3 million people. And that's when it was picked up by the Today Show, by Cosmopolitan, Daily Mail, Huffington Post. There was like 39 online publications that picked it up. Even Ashton Kutcher and George Takei shared it. And I was just blown away. And so I worked really hard and I just kept building this business, and I retired my husband from his 9 to 5 once I was bringing in enough money. And what we've built now today is actually two businesses, a marketing agency and an online university where I teach people how to become successful social media managers. And we just celebrated a huge milestone. We got our second Two Comma Club award. We've done over $2 million in revenue. We're close to getting our third already, which is so crazy. And I've had the privilege of being on stages and sharing my story, but also sharing what's working in social media. So it's been a wild ride over the last 8 years.
Let's take a step back and talk about your childhood. Can you talk about what sort of family you were raised in, and what was your relationship with your parents like?
Whoa. Okay. People don't normally ask me this, but I love that we're going there because this is kind of like a never before told story. So, growing up, my dad was the youth pastor at our church, and my mom was the worship pastor. And so, when you grow up with your parents in leadership at church, you basically are raised running around church, like sneaking into offices, stealing candy. It was the typical PK journey. But something happened when I was growing up that was really interesting. My parents were not a great fit for each other. And so around the age of 13 years old, they started separating, getting back together, separating, getting back together. And that went on for over 5 years when they finally got divorced. My relationships with my parents were interesting, and I don't want to dive too deep into one of them, but I will say I had a very interesting, rocky relationship with my dad growing up. Since then, we've been able to mend the relationship, and he actually lives with us full time. We've got a father-in-law suite in our house, and he lives with us, and he's a great, we don't call him grandpa, we call him Baca, which is Spanish for cow. The kids call him Baca every day. So Baca he's an amazing part of our lives. But my mom was someone who, foolish or not, she believed in me always. And she believed that I was going to be everything that I've become, just in a different vertical. She always believed I was going to be a star or a success or on stages. We just thought that it was going to be in singing or acting or dancing. So my mom was always like my biggest cheerleader growing up, and she always worked to make sure that I had opportunities, and she'd bring me to, like, John Robert Powers, the modeling agency, and she tried so hard, even though we really grew up in true poverty, to make sure that I had opportunities. And even though we couldn't say yes to those opportunities financially, she was there encouraging me every step of the way.
Growing up in that sort of environment, where it seems like there were kind of two elements going or maybe three, of there was poverty, but there was also a lot of support, and then there were some relationship issues among certain members of the family. How did that impact you as an individual, and how have you grown with that, or maybe grown through that as you've gotten older?
I love that question. So we'll dive into each of those three. So, first and foremost, anyone who grew up without knows what it's like to have nothing. And I think sometimes it's almost like there's a nothing to lose mentality, only everything to gain. Growing up in poverty and then having brought a child into a situation of poverty, I was like, this is not what my life is going to be. And that instilled such a strong sense of humor. I remember after my daughter was born, my dad was also just struggling financially, and I was living with him. My daughter and I shared one room in his house. And one winter, like, our heat got shut off, and it was like -20 below. So we set up kerosene heaters and opened the oven and turned it on since it was electric, and bundled up. But those things made me realize how much we can push through. And so that narrative of poverty taught me how to go for success without fear. So that's the very first one. The second one, my mom believing in me, even when it was crazy and didn't make sense. It was kind of like she was always rooting for me. And she would always say, I always knew that you were going to get anything that you set your mind to. And that was really, really beautiful. And so, like, even when I didn't have any followers or anyone who believed, oh, she's going to become the queen of social media or whatever, I just had this voice in my head like, your mom believes in you. You know, your grandparents believe in you. You can do this. So there was that. And then obviously there was the challenging relationships. And I still don't necessarily know what the gift was in all of that. Um, I've definitely learned a lot, but I think one of the things that I took away from that was what I didn't want my kids to grow up in. I wanted my kids to grow up in a stable household that was abundant with love. Like, I wanted my kids to walk in and just feel love all of the time. I didn't want them to be around yelling. I didn't want them to be around fighting. And so, like, I could probably count on one hand the number of times that my kids have heard fighting in our house because it's just not the norm. And so maybe that is the gift. The gift is I identified what I didn't want to see in our futures, and we've fought hard to make sure that that wasn't the case.
As you were growing up, what sort of activities did you like to participate in? Like, what were your hobbies? What did you value as a little kid?
Ooh. So the hobbies and things that I took part in were crafts. I loved crafts as a kid. And I wasn't just like a kid who did like a craft here and there. I would get that like Sculpey clay. And it's the clay where it only hardens if you put it in the oven. And I would create all these like caricatures and mini objects. And I always believed like someday I'm going to bring these somewhere and sell them all. And I kind of had this like crazy idea that I was going to turn it into a business. And I was obsessed with creating. And it's funny because even that, you can see how it's transpired in my career, just this obsession with creating something new. I also was in the Navy Sea Cadets, which was a military program. I went to boot camp and everything. I was in that for, I think, 3 years, from 13 to 16. I participated in a national competition for like semaphore, got first place in the nation. There was one thing that was always important to me, and that was whatever I'm going to do, I want to excel at it. I also tried out like cheerleading and dance line in high school, and I didn't love that as much because I just wasn't a very good dancer. I'm okay, but there was those people who were really good. And that's where I kind of found my sweet spot, and that was in theater. And I realized you don't have to be the best dancer to be in theater, you know, but I can sing and I can put emotion into what I say. And so throughout high school, I was usually actually 3 out of 4 of the plays, my final 2 years of high school, I was the lead in the play. So that was my obsession. I loved speech class. I did Toastmasters several times. And I was always like, I just want to be the best. I want to catch people's attention.
Why do you think you were drawn to the arts? Because it seems like when you were really young, it was more crafts, and then as you got older, you kind of found that sweet spot in theater. Like, what really attracted you to the arts?
Ooh, I think that when it comes down to it, I didn't ever see myself as like an accountant or necessarily like a corporate business person. I love fun and beautiful and inspired things. It's a part of like my blueprint, my DNA. I'm obsessed with things that make people laugh or make people smile or make people cry in a good way. And so I think that string of activities showed kind of the trajectory of like what my career is now. When I was so obsessed with creating crafts, I felt a little limited in that I could create these and they were amazing and I was excited about them, but people weren't as excited about them as I was. And then when I realized that by becoming someone who is good at acting or performing, I have the ability to make people feel. And that's what creativity comes down to me. How can I make people feel? And so marketing was actually a very natural transition for me. When I went into marketing, I was like, oh, this isn't that different from everything I did growing up. I get to speak on stages. I get to show up on interviews. I get to dance on TikTok. I get to try all these things with creativity. And so it was just a kind of a natural progression.
You mentioned how you like to make people feel. How do you do that today? Like how, and I'm not talking about like, oh, I do a video and then people feel stuff. But I'm saying like on that video, how do you make them feel? Like how do you do that?
That's a good question. And the answer, people ask me this a lot, like, does it come down to NLP or ethical persuasion? And those things are all a part of marketing. But I don't rely on manipulation because it doesn't need to be that complex or that underhanded, maybe. I think that when you really step back and you look at people and you identify what are their core dreams, their beliefs, what their childhood was like, who told them they couldn't do it, who told them that they could, what makes people say, yes, this speaks to my soul. I feel this in a deep way. And I've often found that when I go back to my stories and I tell them, people just naturally feel it because it relates to something that was from their lives. Emotions are just based off of our blueprints, our stories. And so if you can tap into the emotions of people's stories by telling your own, it's a natural progression that people feel. It's so powerful.
As you were moving from grade school into high school, how did you really change as a person, right? Because we saw the progression from, and maybe it happened around this time of like crafts into more theater. How else did you really grow and change in that time?
Ooh, so when I was in grade school, I was homeschooled. And I think that that's a huge part of the journey. I was homeschooled until fifth grade, fifth and sixth grade. I went to a private school where I was bullied like mercilessly by the girls in that school. And when I transitioned into public school in seventh grade, there was just this part of me that was like, I don't want to be the girl who doesn't understand social context. I don't want to be the girl who's wearing like overalls with daisy patches on them. I want to be, I guess, socially acceptable. It's almost like there was two journeys, the journey towards becoming socially acceptable and then the journey towards not caring what people think as I became older. But there was that desire of like, how can I make friends and how can I relate to others? And when I went to private school, we didn't learn a lot about social culture or anything that was happening around us. And I remember when I went to public school, people were talking about this girl named J-Lo. And I was like, I have no idea who J-Lo is because we didn't have like internet or like cable TV or anything in our house. And I just remember feeling so behind the times that I became obsessed with understanding all of the social norms, only to realize later on that it was just so that I could break them.
When when you were going on those kind of two paradoxical journeys, um, why did it why was it so important to you later on to then break it? Like, when did that switch happen of like, I, I don't want to fit in with all the norms? Like, when did that click for you?
I would love to say that it happened a long time ago, but that's been a journey over probably the last 3 years. And it kind of started with reading this book. The title is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Bleep. And that book kind of it awakened something inside of me where I realized if I sit here trying to fit into everyone else's idea of who I should be and how I should show up and what's cool or acceptable, I'm going to be really, really limited because the reality of who I am is I'm very nerdy. I geek out on things. I can give you stats and facts like off the top of my head. I can play Jeopardy and dominate against the people on TV. I love video games. I love board games. I love crafts. And I love just a lot of things that people would be like, well, that's not very cool. And I can either suppress that part of me because I fought so hard to be accepted for so long, or I can say, this is who I am. And by doing that, I allow other people the freedom to say, I don't have to fit what society's belief is about who I need to be.
When people are in that state of trying to fit in, to me it seems like there could almost be like tunnel vision going on where they almost don't realize that that's what they're doing. So how, in your opinion, would you like break out of that? Like, how do you become aware that that's what you're doing so that you can take the action to get out of it?
I think that there's several journeys each person needs to go on. There is the journey of first and foremost trying and striving for acceptance. And there's not like one book or one teaching or one YouTube video that brought me into a state of awareness and then into a state of enlightenment about what we need to be or who we should be. It's really interesting because it was more dipping my toe in, reading that book, and then starting to see, okay, the people I admire, the people who are becoming wildly successful, they go out there, they create, they do things that other people love or hate, or sometimes both. And I have to be okay with that. Whenever you create, you can't please everybody. And so I'm so glad that I didn't stay stuck in those sculpey figurines and hoping that everyone would love it, because everybody's not going to love everything that you do. There were also some things that kind of opened my eyes to the fact that everybody is never going to love what you do. For example, I did one kind of experiment. I put on my social media profile, what are the words that you hate when people use? And it got hundreds of comments. And I sat there and read through this list of all the comments and realized that if I took out all of these words from all of my, marketing vernacular, my vocabulary, suddenly I was going to be literally saying the, and, people, hey, what's up? Have a good day. And that's it. It was really, really freeing yet limiting, and realizing if I try to please everybody and I try to fit into what I think people want me to be, man, that makes it really hard to communicate. So I would say that that was a huge part of it. But another thing that made me realize I can't care what people think, except for the people whose opinions I deeply value. Those people I can listen to. It was when I went and brought support to Puerto Rico. We brought water and light to the people after the hurricane. And I got some haters massively for that. People said, do you not care about the other islands? And in that moment, I realized that no matter what you do, even if you're doing pure good, something that doesn't take from anybody, people are going to not like you. And the faster that you find freedom in that, or freedom from that, it allows you to do so much more than you would have been able to when you're stuck inside of everyone else's constraints.
When you're going about choosing that inner circle, if you will, of people whose opinions you do care about deeply, what are your vetting criteria? How do you choose the people who you surround yourself with?
So when I choose the people who I'm surrounded with, I will say it is very small. We have a very small inner circle. While we have groups that we trust deeply, the people that I allow into my thought processes and the deep and big decisions, it's tiny. It's as simple as, my husband. And I chose him because, well, A, I married him, but B, because I've watched his own journey of awareness and enlightenment, and I trust that he has my best interests at heart. I have a best friend, and my best friend I met in the online marketing space. She's somebody who time and time again has proven that she cares about me and the best version of me, not even my own limitations of who I am. And so it's definitely a tried and true process. I have a couple other people, but we keep this circle very, very small, and we just don't ask opinions outside of that circle. And so part of it is we have to observe. Now, I by nature trust everybody. I'm a very trusting person. My husband is not that way. So my husband in a way is a gatekeeper and decides who we're going to let in and who we can keep at a distance from our opinions and our thoughts. But he is someone who is big into, you have to prove yourself over time. So that's kind of what the process looks like.
Let's talk about when you were first in, is it beauty school? Is that the right way to say it?
Dropout. No, but it wasn't. Go ahead.
So you're in school.
Yes.
And I believe you also said that you were hustling at the same time, and you were trying to get seen and get noticed, and you were striving for the best. And then you applied for these 5 top programs or businesses that you wanted to go work with. What did that hustle look like? Like, what did you do at that point to really stand out and let yourself shine?
You know what's so crazy about that period of my life was that was the first time I realized that most people don't push towards greatness. I've seen this over and over again across my career, even when I was in high school auditioning for musicals. And I remember watching as people would show up and they'd have a bad attitude and they would, be muttering under their breath and they would just be like, I gave this girl highlights, but I really didn't care. So look at how bad they look. And I was like, is this the norm? Because I'm mortified when I don't put my best work out there. So just simply the act of showing up and committing yourself to, I'm going to give the best I can, even if it's not perfect, sets you apart from everyone else. And that was a big aha for me. But I've seen it happen over and over again, even in entrepreneurship. I thought everyone was like me, where you're just like driven to be the best. And I realized most people don't truly care. And even people who have been moderately successful, they don't show up and put their heart into it. And so excelling becomes easier the further up you get. All of a sudden, you stand out from everyone by just coming forth with excellence.
When you then went and worked for that marketing agency, what were some of the things that you learned that help you shift from, okay, I am in the beauty space, and then shifting into, okay, now I'm in the marketing space? Like, how did that evolution of your mindset, like, maybe you could comment on that?
Yeah, it was a tough evolution only because I definitely didn't know who I was fully. I've always been really drawn towards like sparkly, fun, pretty, exciting things. And I had this belief that in order for me to be successful in business, I had to be serious and do my best to be professional. And that was definitely a limitation. So as I transitioned from a hairstylist, but even when I was a hairstylist, I experienced that professional pull. But as I transitioned into marketing, I definitely got confused for a little while and thought if I want people to take me seriously, I have to dress in black and gray and white and not show them that I love Legally Blonde and pink and sparkly and all of these crazy things. So if you look at my wardrobe is mostly black, white, and gray. And that's not because those are my favorite colors. It's because I believe that that's who I needed to be in order to get people's attention as a professional, intelligent individual. But now, over the last 3 years, as I've said, okay, I don't want to be stuck in what I think people want me to be. Who am I actually? Especially this last month, as I uncovered that I am a sparkly person and I'm goofy and I'm crazy and I love to have fun more than anything. There was a freedom that came from that. And I'm like, okay, we got to get all of this, wardrobe revamped. I need to get some pink in here. But when people are seeing me coming to life, they're like, wow, she's not professional. Well, I am professional, but she's not boring corporate professional. And that was one of my favorite journeys. And I'm still going on that journey.
It's interesting to talk about this because it seems like a lot of these concepts and the struggles are not over. It seems like you're still kind of going through it despite being the queen of social media and one of the top players in the game. How do you constantly try to get better now? Like, what is your process of improvement even at this point?
I love that question because it is a journey that's never going to be over. And I love that. In the past, I saw the gap between where I was and where I wanted to be, and it made me sad. I was like, wow, I'm going to have to work so hard. And now the process of not just identifying my strengths, but looking at my weaknesses or areas that I'm uncertain about is one of my favorite things to do. To say, hey, I've been pulling all-nighters for 3 years, getting hardly any sleep because I believe that's what I needed to do to be successful. And then stepping back and saying, okay, actually, that's a weakness. That's not a strength. It helped me to get here, but to get to that next phase, there's no more hours in the week. I have to strategically hire people to fill in my weaknesses. I have to approach my weaknesses and actually grow through them. And once you are obsessed with that process, it no longer feels like you're admitting weakness. It feels more like, oh, I'm identifying an area that I can grow. And when I identify this and hire people to help me, but also challenging my own mindset about that weakness, there's a freedom that comes from that. So I look to high performers. I look to people like Russell Brunson and people like Christy Code Red, Alex Sharfin, Taki Moore. I look at Brendan Bouchard, Dean Graziosi. What do these people have? And one of the things that it comes down to is they look at their weaknesses and they say, I want to excel in all areas of my life, which is really powerful.
When you were talking about that transition from like corporate professional and like snoozeville to like being fully yourself and like being sparkly and happy and like human confetti, like all the, the real you.
Yeah.
How does that journey come about, right? Because it's something that I struggle with too, right? Like it feels like a constant pull of, I need to be professional so people take me seriously, and man, I just want to be myself, right? Like, where's the line? How do you make sure you don't go past it?
Yeah, it's an interesting journey because, like I said, I just went on this, not the final leg, but the real, like, this is the key. And one of my mentors, actually, they don't type people, meaning put people into a type. They let you go on your own discovery of your type. But I've been living in the belief that I'm a certain type. And I'm talking about energy types, or some people like Enneagram, because that's very energy based. And are you familiar with Enneagram, Ben?
No, but I'm definitely going to go do more research after this interview.
It's pretty cool. But what I love most about it is that, first and foremost, I took the test and I scored as the person I thought I was supposed to be, because that's what I've been living with as my mask for so long. And this mentor never types people, but finally they like exploded and said, stop it. Like, you are not the energy type that you're trying to identify as. They couldn't handle it anymore. And when I finally said, you know what, I think you're right. And I realized, instead of an energy type, or an energy type, not Enneagram, energy type 1 instead of a 3, and an Enneagram 7 instead of a 3, there was like this big freedom. But you can't just say, like, this is who I am, until you really do some work and discover, wait a second, there's several versions of who I am. There's the who I am for my family. There's the who I am for my business. There's the who I am that the world has conditioned me to believe that I need to be. Who am I? And that means pulling back all pretense and saying, who am I truly? And so there's definitely, I wouldn't say there's necessarily a line, but there was a part of me that, building my business, was nervous that if people saw how goofy and bouncy, and, I'm a Tigger, not a Eeyore, I'm a Tigger, not a Pooh. I'm bouncy and fun and crazy. I was scared, are they going to not take me seriously? But if anything, looking back, I think a lot of people actually didn't work with me because they said, there's something that's not aligning. I feel like maybe, and the word that was often used was, there's something fake. And it's not that I was a fake person, but they sensed that incongruency between who I believed I needed to be and who I actually am. So I think if I were to go back, I could have gotten a lot more success by being exactly who I am.
When you were at that agency and you started getting people reaching out to you to work with them outside of that, outside of your job, how did that manifest itself? Like, what steps did you take to start putting your business before the agency?
So when I started the journey of securing clients, I had left the agency and was working at the tech company, which helped a little bit because it wasn't working with clients and working a side hustle with clients, because I think that would have actually been really detrimental. It was, I'm working with this tech company and I'm going to give them my all while I'm here. And it was actually people who had heard of me through the old agency who were reaching out to me saying, I want to work with you. I saw what you did, or, you were the bright spot in that agency. Great things that made me feel awesome. But I didn't let it interfere with my work at the tech company. So I woke up early and got work done on the way to work, meaning taking discovery calls. I worked over my lunch. Most people take smoke breaks. I took discovery call breaks. And so I made it happen without not working for the agency. I worked late into the night for so long. I didn't get much sleep for a few years, but it never was either or. I did both at the same time. That being said, that means that there wasn't a whole lot of time to be a stellar mom or an amazing wife. And so there were definitely sacrifices that happened on the way to building a successful business.
At what point and what really made you decide, okay, now I'm going all in on my business. I'm not holding anything back. It's go time.
Probably from the moment that I started. I've never been a dabbler. That's never been a part of who I am. Case in point. So for example, I have some hobbies, and when I tell my family oh, I'm going to try this, they kind of go, uh-oh, because they know that for at least a few months, I'm going to go hard. So one of my hobbies is Mario Kart. And I know that sounds really funny, but I played it all growing up. And then when we got our Nintendo Switch, I was like, I'm going to play Mario Kart. I don't just play Mario Kart. I dominate at Mario Kart. I will challenge anybody to a game, race or battle, and I will destroy them because I've never been a dabbler. And it comes down to it being this simple. I don't like to do something I'm not good at. So I make a decision. Can I get good at this? Or if, for example, if someone were to be like, hey, do you want to play basketball? I'd say no, because I'm 5'3" and I can't jump and I can't shoot and I don't run fast. I'm just never going to be good. So I'm not even going to try based on physical limitations. So every single thing I do, I either go all in and hit it hard, or I just don't do it at all. That's kind of how it went. Yeah.
So far, it seems like we've had 2 public challenges for Jeopardy and for Mario Kart now.
Let's do it. I'm very competitive. Let's do it.
So once you were only focused on your business and you didn't have anything else to really distract you, yeah. no other work stuff, that is, did you see a difference in the growth of your business? What was it like going from, and you were probably putting in full-time hours, but just for the sake of the comparison, part-time to full-time?
Yes. There was actually a momentary pause as soon as I left my 9 to 5, because the day after I submitted notice, my biggest client left. And all of a sudden I was like, what did I do? And I was so scared that I made a mistake. Now, for years, from 11 until, let's see, how old am I? I'm 29, until really about 28, I struggled with depression and anxiety. But I still took action regardless. I always knew action's going to cure it, or at least still get something going. So it was kind of interesting because it was just really weird, because I got home with this sense of extreme loss and I was scared. And so there was a moment where I felt very frozen. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to make it right. And so what I did was I wrote a children's book. And I sat there and I wrote this book and I put it on, pieces of paper, and I taped them all across my dining room. And I sat there, and writing that book allowed me to mourn the loss of security, or perceived security, for the rest of my life. And I just knew that if I could get through that time, everything would be okay. But it took me a moment. So then following that, I went all in and went hard. But it wasn't really until February of 2017. Let's see, what year are we in? 2019. February of 2017, when I went to Funnel Hacking Live, that I actually put my money where my mouth is. And I joined Russell Brunson's Inner Circle when I didn't have the money, and found a way creatively to make it work. But that was when I realized, okay, now the stakes are high. I've got to make this work. And that was when you saw my business trajectory hockey stick.
What were some of those changes? And I know we just talked about you put your
Yeah.
money where your mouth is, and then it hockey sticked up. But like, what were some of the other changes that happened at that time that really caused that skyrocket?
I think one of the biggest things was literally going all in. That was a huge part of the process, was just this kind of, it's all or nothing now. Um, the potential for failure is bigger because we've got a lot more money on the line. Oh, I don't know why I'm accidentally screen sharing. There we go. I'm not screen sharing. So was that was one part of it, was just this, there's 25, well, actually $30,000 on the line. I have to make this happen. But another change that happened was, it was kind of mental. It was like an obsession. All of a sudden I was like, I'm not satisfied with where I'm at. Not even close. I'm not at mastery, and it bothers me. And I think that was one of the biggest changes, was suddenly I got this obsession, this fuel to go further, harder, faster. And it hasn't dried up, which is really cool. It makes it hard to sleep at night, but it's never gone away since then.
So tactically, did you did you just go out and meet different people, or did you start changing your offering, or did you start r- working with a different funnel or different traffic? Like, was there anything tactically, or was it totally like a mindset thing?
Mindset was a big part of it, but tactically, I started surrounding myself with bigger circles. And by bigger, I mean more successful. Circles that were people who had achieved things I wanted that I didn't know were possible yet. So that was a big part of it. I didn't necessarily change my offers, I just made more offers. But then I started to raise my rates little at a time. And that was really powerful, really powerful. So I took on a lot of people at low rates that I probably shouldn't have at that point. But being around people like in the inner circle and in different networks that were more successful and more fulfilled, that in and of itself pushed me further. So not a lot changed tactically, but there was definitely an up level feeling. So I would say it all stemmed though from mindset, without a doubt.
For those people who may still be in that area where they still haven't fully taken off yet, right? They haven't become their own queen or king of social media. Not that there can be more than one, of course. I'm just kidding. Um, but how do they how do they increase that? How do they surround themselves with those better people when they may be at this place right here?
The best way, and this is what I kind of recognized, was that you have to pay to get into the bigger rooms. That was a really hard realization for me because I wanted to believe that I could get into the bigger, smarter rooms where I'm the dumbest person there by just showing up, and maybe someone will notice me and maybe they'll say like, "Oh, she belongs in our room." But if you're the dumbest person in a room, you weren't invited there. Like, it makes sense. The smartest people in the room get invited there. And that's when I had this realization that if I wanted to get into that room, I had to pay to get in there. And it was definitely a leap of faith. I remember I came home and I looked at my husband and I said, "Do you trust me?" And it's kind of like that question from Aladdin, where Aladdin holds out his hand to Jasmine and says, "Do you trust me?" And, then jump. But it was really, really crazy because I knew that getting into that better room and being the dumbest person was going to make me say, "I got to learn this." And I had already committed fully to making it happen. So we had to just go all in. So being around those other people made me realize how little I knew and forced me to close the gap as fast as I could.
Once things started to take off and you started raising your rates and getting more clients and bigger clients, what were some of the lessons that you learned going from kind of a startup zone to a bigger business where you're doing the seven-figure award, the Two Comma Club award. You got two of them, and you're about to hit your third. What are those tactical changes or lessons that you've learned going from that small spot to now this large business?
Oh man, there's a couple big tactical changes that have to happen. For example, you have to hire. You need to hire. And I have a different outlook on hiring than most people do. I believe that you hire the lowest dollar per hour people first to free your time up without just taxing your business. I see a lot of people who are like, well, I'm making $10,000 a month, so I hired a social media strategist for 5K a month. And I'm like, what are you doing? No, hire someone part-time as an assistant to handle your emails and free you up from that time. That's one of the very first things tactically that you need to do. Another thing is you have to become as streamlined and systematized as you possibly can. So we have everything in Google Drive and Trello. So nothing crazy fancy, but systematized and streamlined. So our client onboarding process and launch process became very, very simple, very easy for the clients. They oftentimes say, wow, I can't believe you're an agency, because agencies usually take forever to get everything going, but we can get a client up and running in a week. And part of that is because we streamlined and systematized everything. Another thing that tactically has to change is you as the business owner have to stop getting shiny object syndrome. And I always have this as like my reminder, because people say like, look, a squirrel. And so I actually got a sparkly squirrel because I'm like shiny object, squirrel. And this is my reminder that anything that's outside of our plan is a distraction. It's not my new $1 million idea. It's a distraction because I have my $1 million idea clearly, and I need to focus completely on that. So those are some of the biggest things that tactically changed.
We've talked a lot about how you've gotten to where you are now, but can you really go and drill down into exactly what you're doing right now? And please, don't be afraid to brag a little bit.
Oh. Okay, so I like that, the permission to brag. That's kind of fun. Some of the things that have helped me to get exactly to where I am today is I have this philosophy, and this like it radiates in everything I do. I want everyone to know my name and my face. So if I have to tweet at influencers, if I have to run ads to people, if I have to show up on every single podcast, summit, you name it, I'm going to be there. That was a huge part of me growing very quickly. And I remember there were often times where people would say, how did Rachel show up overnight? Or at least that's how it feels, right? Suddenly I went from no one knowing who I was to a decent amount of people knowing who I was. And people were like, how did that happen? And when it comes down to it, I showed up everywhere. I was like, I'm not going to miss an opportunity. Another thing that I've done really well is when I hire a mentor, I want to be their star student. So I work really hard to make my mentors look good. And I know if I build relationships with my mentors and always put them first and say like, oh, it's because of my mentor, they're going to give me platform and give me visibility and shout me out and trust me and come up with opportunities for me. That was one thing that I know I did very well. But then also relationships. Even though it gets harder and harder the more my inbox gets flooded, I try to respond to everyone. And if you ever meet me at a conference, you'll see that every person who stops me, I put tunnel vision on, blinders, and I just focus on the person. Even if I only have 5 or 15 seconds before we have to dash off, I want every single person to say like, she made me feel like the most important person in this room. And those simple things have been game changers because no one else does it.
When you are describing your business now, right, and talking about all the ventures that you're a part of, right, what are the most important things that you're focusing on right now?
It's crazy because that's even changed over the last couple of weeks. So I have 2 businesses, a full service digital marketing agency and an online university. And a couple of weeks ago, I actually had the realization, thanks to my mentors who told me over and over again, you cannot be in charge of 2 businesses that are growing quickly. I actually stepped back as CEO of the agency and stepped into a CMO role intentionally because I knew I couldn't do both at the same time, not to the best of my ability. So everything that I do falls into the umbrella of Social Media United, whether it's SMU Elite or our incubator, the Viral Framework, the Social Click, my high-end mastermind for agency owners. Those things all fall under the SMU umbrella. If it's not under that umbrella, I don't focus on it at all.
Where are you going, right? Like 5, 10, 20 years from now, what does the future look like for Rachel?
So big. Are you sure we want to dive on into it? um, it's really funny because I'm reading this book that's actually challenging me on a new level. And it's called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. This book, it's not for when you're first starting, but it's definitely as you've started to build a business. This book has both humbled me, made me have a heightened awareness of what's possible. This book gives basically my takeaway from it. I'm like reading it as I'm on a plane bawling because it just was so true for where I'm at. It was what my takeaway is that I don't have to consider myself a genius. I also don't have to say, well, no, I'm not anything great. I just am. And when I bring myself and I say I'm going to be a conduit of ideas and I'm going to bring ideas to life, and if I can't, I'm going to pass them on, we can grow so much bigger. And so I've had these ideas and these clear visions of where my future is going. I know that I'm going to have TV shows and that I'm going to ultimately be on red carpets in some capacity. And I don't know what that is yet, but it's okay. It's really big. I mean, when I look at the people who I want to emulate, I look at Oprah Winfrey, even in some capacity, Reese Witherspoon. I look at Taylor Swift and Ariana Grande for the speed with which she's executed so many big things. And I look at each of these people and I say, I belong on that list. And so, while I'm not going to sit and outline all of the steps, even though I see a lot of it very clearly, it's very big. And I've always known that. I think even from the time I was a little kid.
So, Rachel, I want to thank you so much for coming on the interview today. It has truly been an honor and a pleasure to share this time with you. I have a few more questions, and then we'll wrap on up.
Let's do it.
One of the foundations of this show is connection, right? Connection between you and I as friends, as guest and host, between you and the audience, me and the audience members and each other. And I'm obsessed with understanding and drilling down into what really creates human connection. So I want to know, what is your philosophy on developing real, genuine, and meaningful human connection?
Ooh, I love that. I think it all comes down to empathy. Empathy is huge. When you become more successful and more enlightened, and this is just people in general, it's very easy to distance yourself from others and to say, oh, they're not able to help me, or they're not in a place where we can even relate. But if you step back with empathy towards every person and you say, wow, they're in their own place on their own journey, and you just love people. If you think about their unique story, if you think about their challenges, their dreams, their goals, it just makes you love people. And that's definitely a challenge sometimes when you also see the ways that sometimes humans can treat each other. And it's easy to say, I don't like people. Or sometimes I hear people say, oh, I hate people. But I don't believe that that's entirely true, or else none of us would have friends or, people that we talk to every day. It's just as easy to say, I love people. And all it takes is stepping back and not being in your success or being on your platform and just having a heart-to-heart conversation. Like, this has felt so connected to me. This has been one of my favorite interviews that I've ever had, and I've had a lot, because you're not distancing yourself and reading just question after question off of a piece of paper without listening. Like, you're actually listening to what I'm saying, and I feel so understood. That's the same way that I believe that connection is formed with every single person we come across. And it all stems from truly caring, having empathy.
What is your greatest theory?
Ooh, I don't know if I have a greatest theory. I have quite a few theories. I could share one that's fully formed. I have a lot of theories that are being formed. Um, one that I came up with years ago that I still believe, and one that I'm going to try to put out there. It does bore people because it's the epitome of nerd. People are like, okay, that's not as interesting as social media. But I have this belief, and it's based on my life, but other people's lives as well, that I'm going to take a step back. So I used to work for an IT company, a network hardware company in the IT space. And I learned about data centers. And data centers are these places that hold all this data. And it's just like millions and millions or billions or trillions or, Googleplex number of screenshots of data over and over and over again. And the crazy thing is, the bigger a company gets, the bigger their data centers have to be. Our human mind is like a data center. Now, the crazy thing about it is that within data centers, there's a process that can save you from having to consistently upgrade your building over and over and over again. And it's called hyperconvergence. Hyperconvergence is basically when your computer, or the process of hyperconvergence, looks at all of these data entry points and says, all of these are similar. I'm going to converge them all together and save us space so we don't have to waste space. Now, the crazy thing is, I have this theory that our minds are the ultimate hyperconvergence unit. Our minds look at our days and our moments and our memories, and if there's too many that are similar, it squeezes them all together and says, I'm not going to waste space holding all of these entry points because they're almost the same. So when you talk to people who say life is flying by, or it feels like time moves so fast, I've never understood that, only because I've always felt like time goes incredibly slow. I've always felt that way. But even as you've heard throughout this interview, I've done a lot, even in the last 30 days, even in the last several months, even in the last few years, especially since I was 11. And there's so many unique data points that time goes slower for me. And so people are sitting there letting their brain hyperconverge their life together, and they feel like it was all just one big blur. And if you would just take the time to create unique data points that are different, interesting, fun, exciting, exhilarating, terrifying, all of a sudden, time slows down. It's pretty nerdy. That's my favorite theory I have.
That's an awesome theory, by the way.
Thank you.
I think that's really cool. So when you're thinking about how the brain is compressing all of these similar frames, if you will, does that play, like, are you thinking about that when you're putting out content and creating content from the perspective of you want to be one of those things that sticks out from that convergence?
Absolutely. I mean, I've never had that conscious thought, but I know it's come into play. When I think of a pattern interrupt, it's absolutely a data point. If you put out ads that look the same as everyone else, you're just another face in the news feed and people never remember you. But if you have a video that's crazy or hilarious or dumb, like, people remember that. And there's something amazing about that. So the more that I lean into this crazy energy type of a one and who I really am, I naturally create content that makes people say, oh, I couldn't forget her because that girl's goofy. It's something that I think just naturally occurs. But I love the way that you tied that into hyperconvergence.
Well, I honestly, I'm just listening here. You're the expert with all the brilliance. So that thanks to you for that. So again, Rachel, I do want to thank you so much. I have two more questions for you. Then we'll wrap up. The first is there anything about yourself that you think is an important part of who you are that we did not talk about today? In other words, what did I miss?
Ooh, we didn't talk about it. People ask a lot about it, but they don't usually ask the right questions. And that's about my identity as a mom. So I have 3 kids. I have an 8-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 10-month-old. But the interesting thing is I don't get offended that people don't ask, because who I am as an entrepreneur is not the same as who I am as a mom. those are two very different parts of my life. I've never called myself a mompreneur, mumpreneur, or, any of those things, because as an entrepreneur, I'm intense and I'm fun, but on an intense level and focused. And with kids, everything is so different. Like, it's a curveball every day. You never know what's going to happen. I mean, you might have plans to go hang out with your kids, and all of a sudden one of them gets sick all over the living room, and you realize we can't go. But who I am as a mom, most people ask the same question, and that's, how do you balance it all? And that's kind of a tough question to answer. I don't ever feel like I'm balancing everything well. I'm just doing the best that I can. But I do spend several hours every single day with my kids. And that means work does not creep in. And who I am as a mom is very, very loving. It's full of empathy. It's full of lots of laughter. Like last night, we had, that thing where you do X marks the spot, circle and a dot, spiders crawling up, blood rushing down. And we did all these crazy variations of it, probably for 45 minutes when it was supposed to be bedtime, just because we were having such a great time together. And so instead of asking like who I am and how I balance things as a mom, it's more of like, how do you make sure that you just show up for your kids? And my favorite thing is realizing I don't have to always be there for my kids. I don't have to have them home every single day. But every single day, I show them that I care by making them a priority for a set of time.
So the last question, it's a little bit of a selfish question, so I'd appreciate if you humor me a bit. I'm 24, right? I have a couple different businesses, but this show is my greatest passion. What question should I be asking you that I just wouldn't think to ask?
Ooh, you saved the hardest question for last. What question should you be asking? The funny thing is you kind of asked it in a way, but if I were to get really laser focused, when I sit down with my mentors, the question I want to ask them is, what are the 3 things that I need to do to be successful? Or what are the 3 things that were the biggest needle movers in your business? And I would say it is this. It's number 1, take action every day. There's a lot of time waste. People waste a lot of time, all of us. I mean, it's not intentional, but I travel 2 to 9 times a month, and I realized how much time is wasted on the airplane, waiting for takeoff, standing in line, sitting around, in the terminal. And if you use that time to take action, even if it's something small, all of that time can add up to big needle moving in your business. So I would say that's number 1. Number 2 is invest into your mindset. Not necessarily money, but definitely time. Find the mindset of people who have been successful. And I loved what Brendan Burchard said in one of his recent videos. He said, everybody downplays the importance of mindset and personal development until they're in crisis. When you proactively handle mindset, it's interesting because you never see the results of it because you just don't have a crisis. And so it's kind of like when people eat healthy to prevent cancer, you're never going to see the results. You're like, I don't even know if this is working. Well, do you have cancer? No. So it's working. So the same thing is true with personal development. Your mindset, personal development, all of that is everything. And if you are listening to this and you're like, well, I've never experienced anything, great, awesome. The bigger you get, the further you have to fall. And that awareness of how high things can get leads you to need personal development and mindset work. And then number 3, be careful, but not stingy when you hire mentors. Mentors, this is a hire of time and money. You want to pay. Oh, I wasn't coughing the whole time till now. You want to pay mentors who are further along than you. You don't want to hire just anyone. Get people who are vetted, who are trusted, people who have achieved what you're looking to achieve, but bigger. You want them to be at least 5 steps ahead, and you want them to have openly experienced crisis that's bigger than the crisis that you have been through. That is an absolute game changer. But then listen to everything that they say and implement it.
Rachel, again, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. It truly has been an honor to share this time with you. And so I just want to say thank you, and to everybody who's listening. I want to thank you all for supporting the show and listening and watching. And all I can say is that I love you guys. So thank you all so much for that. But Rachel, you want to wrap us up?
Let's do it. Well, if you want to learn more about me, you can go to just my website. It's really easy. Rachel Pedersen, all E's and a D. And remember, we'll just recap those 3 points. Take action, invest time into your mindset, invest money and time into a mentor, and have fun. Be yourself.
Thank you so much. So everybody remember, this has been another Project Egg episode where we interview entrepreneurs to help you build your business, create your dream life, so that we can all live in a better world together. Take care.